hello. Hello, everyone far off in this digital space and here in this virtual room with me. I'm so excited to be participating in this panel and to be moderating kind of a talk about the state of the immersive interactive industry as we are here in the Immersive Interactive Championships. My name is Zoe. I'm a producer, designer, experienced designer as well, wear many hats, and I'm really excited to be talking with you all about your thoughts on the state of our work. I'll kind of pass over to you guys so you can introduce yourselves, and then we can get to talking. So Gilberto, you can go first.
Hello, I'm Gil. I'm a multimedia artist and director at INTUS. I'm also excited to be here today with you, Zoe. I love your work, and it's amazing, so lovely to be around with you. And you guys, Landon and Brandon, I don't know you guys personally, but I love your work. I follow your work, and it's amazing. So I'm very happy to be with you guys.
Thank you. You as well. I'm a big fan of your work. One of the things that I did right before the pandemic was go to an installation that INTUS worked on. So it was like the last new media art I remember.
Nice. Yeah, I'm in the same boat of we all see there's a ton of people who I only know their Instagram handle or something. I don't even know their real name, but you feel like you've seen their work for years and stuff like that. And so even this level of contact is awesome, man.
Awesome. Great. So we're kind of still living in strange times. It's 2021, so it's thankfully no longer 2020, but we're kind of living in this pandemic, post-pandemic world. And I'm, in the work that we do that largely are these physical installation spaces or places that we're working together in physical proximity. I'm curious, what do you all think is the biggest change in our industry in the past 3 to 5 years? It can be about relating to the pandemic or even more so. How do you think the industry has changed in the recent years?
Oh, man. I mean, I would say the obvious answer to that is XR, AR, all that kind of stuff. And just remote. It's hard to say whether the streaming technologies and something like SRT or just like the super low latency point-to-point stuff, which aspect of it, was kind of like COVID quarantine motivated, but was also like this huge leap in kind of what changed what we do. But I feel like everything now, even as we get back to some new situation, it's still, there's just going to be way more remotes. Like the idea of just sending a team out and doing a remote hit and all that stuff is just like so much more a part of what I do anyway with live. Installation is a bit different, but still, I would say that's one at least.
Yeah, also I think that it's like much more connection between everything, right? It's like this new plugin with touch for real and the notch blocks inside everything. So I think that in these recent years, it's like much more connection between all the companies that are in this field, and I think it's very interesting that what we can make, right? It's like.
Yeah, that's the interoperability is crazy now. I feel like maybe some companies were trying to compete with each other, and then at a certain point they realized they all fill a certain niche and that they should just work together.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I would say is my favorite thing about some of them, specifically Notch, at first. But yeah, I agree. There's no one ring to rule them all. Like they all have these like particular things, and they might do it really well, and the other one does it terribly, but nothing has everything.
Yes. One of the things I wanted to say, because what we're looking at the past 3 to 5 years, is that like because of this there's this slowdown in technological process, just because we can't make computers as fast as we used to, as quick, like because of Moore's law dying, silicon fabrication, all that stuff, which has just put this huge focus and pressure on innovative new ways to approach problems, like machine learning, of course, but also do these new graphics API features, ray tracing. And also, one of the big opportunities is like improving tools and like usability and ergonomics, and kind of breaking down like gatekeeping around difficult, like even things like GPU programming, because to add, because we need all of this to add value, because value doesn't just automatically come from computers getting twice as fast and half as cheap, and you don't have to worry about, you don't have to change, you don't have to optimize your code or whatever. So I think that's one of the more interesting things I've seen.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring that up, like the way that the work has changed, but how technology is always also evolving, especially with advancements in kind of machine learning and computing. I'm curious, like, what other changes or advancements have you seen that have like really impacted potentially your workflows or the way that projects are approached?
I'll start with that. So one, and this kind of goes off of what Gilberto was saying about with people are integrating game engines with these new media art tools, and so I'm getting a lot of asks from clients to combine things, or like they want projection mapping, with something that works with Touch Designer. But then they want some rendering from a game engine, but then they also want a different scene that's rendered in Notch. But one of the biggest things I'm getting is that game engines are really powerful and have like deep extensibility, but like the iteration times are so slow that I'm still going back to Touch Designer and Notch to do prototyping and proof of concept, and then implementing in the game engine once I know it's what the client wants. And that's a new workflow for me. Houdini as well, which is related to Touch Designer. So it's just like but it's been really difficult to like port learning how to port things between frameworks and languages is like way more of a pain than I thought it would be.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that same, what Gilbert says, we're all in the same muck, with that exact same question. Like every job that comes, it's like, is it Notch, is it Touch, is it Unreal? And what a semblance of the three. And then the previs to show step being as short as possible is like where I'm at right now, because at a certain point too, well, some of my clients, they're all like superstars, and they have so much going on that from just getting from that pitch phase rapid fire, like a few a week of like shows that you're pitching. And then you don't want to have, like for me, for a while there, I would have to take a model from Vectorworks or SketchUp or somewhere and put it here and like change all the UVs for whatever. And just trying to now like being able to just pipe textures into a model that already exists, drop a 3D thing that you've already built before into another world, just set up the origin, whatever. For me, that also, like, how frictionless, can I move between these things or have them running side by side, I would say, is like where the bleeding edge is how much can you kind of integrate them all together quickly and not go down this. I mean, the martyrs at the front that are figuring it out first. I mean, those banging their heads on the wall and stuff. I mean, I'm thankful for those people because I kind of jump in as the packages are getting like a little easier.
Yeah, I feel like it's still early days for what is possible. One thing that impressed me was Houdini engine has this thing with Unreal and Unity where it syncs the viewport. You move the viewport in one application, moves in the other one. And then I know like Touch Engine is pretty new, and it's where and then Notch blocks is a similar concept. So I think finding some common ground around that, and I think like Pixar's USD Universal Scene Description, the whole kind of the NVIDIA Omniverse concept. I think it's still like people are just making these things as kind of a proof of concept, but we haven't found like where all of the common ground should be, and developing standards just takes a really long time doing things by committee, but it's exciting to see it happening.
Definitely.
Yeah, for me it's the same. It's like we are in that more in developing. We are like working a lot with cinema and Houdini and stuff, but as Brandon says, the project has very tight deadlines. So that's amazing about these all real-time tools, right? That you already have all your set skills there, and you can just rent things out and delivery like good quality and short deadlines, right? It's like,
Oh yeah, I had the conversation recently of I don't want to render and upload anything. Like no.
Coming from also a traditional film background, that's what really made me excited about tools like Touch Designer and Notch, just because it's like you make it and I'm like, oh, it's going. I don't have to like move the playhead over and wait for it to render and then be able to see it, or also, have to bake it out. So I think that's also what's really powerful. I'm curious, so do you find that clients are asking you to use specific tools when creating works? It's come up a few times in some of the conversations that I've had, and I'm curious if that's happening to you as well. Like they're like, we really want you to use X. I'm curious how you approach that.
For me, really, I think all clients just need to accomplish some objective, but they don't care really what software you are using. It's like, I want this.
Unless you're coming into the project really late, like unless it's a breakdown rush job. Those are the only ones I feel like you're not able to talk around because they were left with something and they've got kind of a sunk cost bias and a deadline, and they just have to find someone that can take over something that someone had to leave behind, whether it was for business reasons or sometimes medical reasons, or that someone might leave a project.
I think that's also just a big question of like, what part of the process do you find yourself in? Like which conversations? Mm-hmm. Sometimes when I say client, they're like my friends that are animators, and they're like, they get a commercial job comes in, they want to execute it, they want to build it in something, and they want me to run it. Mm-hmm. So there's that type of thing. And then sometimes it's just purely a content job where, it's like, just make X, Y, Z happen, whatever the best tool is for that. That's a whole variety too. And sometimes also someone asked me to design for it. This is happening right now with a concert where the infrastructure is already in as disc guys. So it's like, I'm going to use Notch so that I can just go in easily and not have to be like, can I add a server? Can I add a bunch of shit? Like,
right.
They don't want to do all that either. So it really depends on what conversation it is.
Well, no, like Notch has those that it creates that web server that you can use to change parameters. Like you don't have to set up. It's very minimal setup to like iterate on. I feel like what I would call look dev, but for like really high end simulation rendering stuff that if you were doing in say C4D Houdini would just be really long time to just iterate on and get back from the client.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really feels like a big piece of this industry, just because it is kind of in the industry of thinking about like more immersive AR, XR, mixed media work. It's like adaptability is like a big thing. You just kind of have to be like, okay, what do you actually want? And then, what's the fastest way and the most stable and best way that, can execute that for you? I'm curious.
Not to mention the weird camera thing. Like you build a world you think is going to look one way, you put it into space, you zoom in with the camera, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, that fence post is now like a big deal. And like this thing over here, it's like stuff, it's just or
once it happens at scale, whether it's LED wall projection mapping or VR, there's a thing where when you're on your computer with the laptop screen or whatever you've got, and then all of a sudden you see it at scale, whether that's physical or VR. Sometimes it's like, oh, well, this is way too big. There's something that came up. It comes up a lot in VR game development. Like they're like, oh, we made a motorcycle, and then we went into VR, and then it was like 8 feet tall. But there's been a lot of challenges recently with that. I think with remote work, because we're having you can't have everyone on site, or there's no reason to have everyone on site, and so sometimes dealing with things where like the frame rate looks like fine on a tiny screen, but then when you've got a giant LED installation, it's taking up so much space in your retina that it looks stuttery, even though it's running at full frame rate.
Yeah. I feel like you see that even with working with different kind of 3D environments. They all have their different They either work on like a metric system or different units of measurement. And so then even working across applications, it's like, you have to make sure that you're like working in like halves or quarters or tenths or whatever it needs to be able to move things across different applications. So yeah, I totally feel that. I'm curious, with the industry changing so much in the last couple years, has it been hard to find new work? And if so, like, what's the hardest part of getting projects nowadays or finding new work?
For me, I don't know. I feel lucky because it's harder to learn to say to no to projects for me now. So it's like,
yeah, and that can burn you too. Pitch, the hardest part. I mean, it's all about previs, right? Like, I feel like every single job, like what gets pushed go is previs, and how good and how many iterations the previs can have quickly, I feel like is the most important tool. Some clients you have relationships with where you can just describe stuff, but I think a lot of things, even if I'm just experimenting and something I want to do that doesn't exist yet, I'm just going to make it and go try to sell it or whatever, I still have to build it in the previous world, for myself, and also to get a sense of like when it's got set scale and all that, and like get it going. So I don't know about the hardest thing though. The hardest thing is like getting the job you want. I have a lot of jobs that pay the bills and the people are super nice and it's awesome. Everyone's really, really pro. But it's like things aren't special because they happen all the time. Like the 120 jobs where you're like, oh my God, I'm going to remember that one. Like that's the hard part. And I feel like how to get in those meetings, or that's been elusive. If that's
totally. Yeah.
One thing that's been difficult for me is I branched out into using a lot more different frameworks and engines. I feel like I'm just using everything now. And because of that, I'm using Unity a lot and Unreal, but it's like, I already kind of went over that, the prototyping versus the execution, but that opened me up to like, I'm getting hit up on LinkedIn with like jobs that aren't a good fit for me. And it's been difficult for me to like filter through. I'm like, because I'm like, okay, well now I'm on this, I have my skill sets is too broad according to the, to my, my description on LinkedIn, but and realizing that I'm really a specialist and not a generalist, and having to explain that to clients so to set expectations, because sometimes they really need a generalist, but I'm like not going to take initiative on things that generalists will. But it takes it's like every project I feel like needs both specialists and generalists. So having to like setting those expectations is a new experience for me.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really great observation that you're making. Like the kind of fine line between, I think, a specialist and a generalist is something that often others don't see. And so they're like, but why is this so hard? Like, why can't you just do this? Isn't this what you do? And you're like, it's always, everything is like, when you uncover it, is so much more complex. And there's always kind of like a, they don't necessarily see that as much. I'm curious.
Big games and movies are made by teams of 600, 800 people.
Yeah.
Exactly. We talked about it a little bit, but I'm curious, in terms of using Touch Designer and Notch, what are some of the things that you like most about those softwares? We talked about the part that they're real time, but I'm curious if you have other things that you like want to call out as being like really exciting pieces of the software that you'd like to share with others, or that really, that touch your heart.
I mean, for me, Touch is like is the hub, is where everything is connected. So, I mean, we prototype everything in Touch, even like pitches or just ideas. It's great for everything. It's like the greatest tool ever to combine whatever you want But I love Notch too because it's so powerful in the graphics and particle systems and all the things that you love about VFX and I mean the particle systems from the scratch for me was like I love that, right? And when I see the Notch system, I was mind blowing, right? It's like very powerful and with a few clicks and a few nodes, you can make something that it looks pretty cool.
Yeah, I would agree with both those two statements like wholeheartedly. I mean, touch is like the spine of everything I do at this point. And I came from like Max Jitter years and years ago, and then through kind of Quartz Composer stuff. So having a platform where you can sandbox a whole bunch of different languages, control all kinds of different things, have laptops scattered around doing specific things, that type of tool is kind of like the spine of everything I do. I will say Touch, though, won me over. The reason I switched to Touch years ago was actually just Jutter-free playback. It is the
True.
It is the cleanest playback engine there is if you really tune it. And for me, that was like, okay, step one. It's clean. And then what do I invest my time in? So I did those two things. And then for Notch, exact same thing, how fast I can get to like a cinema level VFX look quickly, where, you know, it's not that you can't do that in Touch, but it's just going to take a lot longer to build it from just blocks to start. So the tools that you pay for and the quickness of that. And then also a Notch, you know, for me, walking into like any vendor stage with a USB key, that's powerful. You know, the fact that I can do that. And I wish Touch, like with Touch, I have to ask them, hey, can I put this on a box or something? Most of the time I can, and most of the time it's a situation. But, you know, that interoperability thing, or you can just drop it with exposed controls and something, that's also one of my favorite things about Notch.
And speaking to video playback, the Notch LC video codec and then marrying that with Touch Designer makes like just, again, more of a video powerhouse than we even started with. The main thing about Touch Designer is I think like the Python API opened it up to this whole like to this academic, you know, prototyping research and which would decidedly a different like direction than say, even though say Houdini supports Python, Touch Designer went all in on it. And I think that was a really good move for the type of use cases for rapid prototyping. But also just for interoperability, like you can there's a Python library for everything. It's like I feel like it's the most accessible programming language today. If anyone was gonna looking to learn how to code today, you should learn Python, and and if you use it within Touch Designer, you'll be able to see and visualize things way faster than if you were just using Python in some libraries. Totally. And then similar things about Notch. It's like I would say it has similar. It can do similar things that say Houdini can do in Cinema 4D, but it covers that kind of the most common use cases. It's like it's not as customizable as Houdini, but it's like 90% of what clients want. And then if you need to go custom beyond that, then maybe you could do some custom plugin or something. But
the first time that I saw that it's gonna be, I think was in the NotchCon that they announced the partnership between Notch and Touch. I was like, man, this is mind blowing. To put them together was like, fuck.
Because they complement really well. They both have what each other one is missing, and it's in a sense. So it's a real powerful duo.
Awesome. I'm curious. So as you work with other people in the industry, I'm curious, what is a piece of tip or advice that you would give to artists or developers as they start to kind of break through into this space? Because, even though we've been working in it for years and years, there are always new people who are like, man, this like immersive projection stuff is so cool. Like, I really want to get into that. Or like, these kind of all virtual world sets. A lot of people are really interested in the industry and kind of trying to make their way in. So I'm curious, what kind of tips or advice would you give to folks who are interested in this, working in this industry?
So someone new.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, I was just asking to clarify. So someone new to it, not somebody else already in it?
Yeah, someone who's new. Who's
I can start if you want. The biggest advice I'd have would be like try a lot of different languages and software all at once, like processing from Casey Reese, because it was designed for learning for visually minded people to learn to code as and it's not just a starting point. You can go pretty far with processing, but I feel like at a certain point you want to then get into Touch Designer, Notch, open frameworks, a lot of different possibilities there. But it's one of the most useful things for me was finding kind of Rosetta Stone type examples between different languages and frameworks, because then it wasn't just that I could do things in other frameworks, but that I understood the core concept that they all shared. And there's a website called rosettacode.org, which just has a kind of a Wikipedia of the same concept just done in different languages to try to help you understand. But I think taking that concept to another level with visual programming languages, you could do something in Touch, find something that someone's done in Touch Designer and Notch and a game engine, Unity, Unreal, and try to find the common threads between them, and you'll just get a better sense of what they all actually have in common, and get those core concepts. Which is there was Edward Sizovs had this blog post called "Stop Learning Frameworks," which is kind of about that. It's don't worry about learning the frameworks and the languages. You need to get the core concepts more than anything.
For me, I think I have to say that you can. The rabbit hole in technology is quite easy to find. It. It's you are knowing this software, and then is another software, and then is a new plugin, and then it's always something new. And maybe also I recommend to also stay in the creative way. Because at the end of this technology is just a medium. So what is the idea? What is the meaning of the stuff you are doing? So sometimes also it's important to have some pre-production, right? Concepts, true concepts, ideas, and then technology, use it to something that is meaningful. I mean, for the client or for the users, but don't forget to also, dig more into the concepts and ideas.
Yeah, I would echo that. That's the same thing I would say is think about the fact that the first 85% of anything you learn should come actually really rapidly, and that last 15% to mastery is the rest of your life, and just understand that. And so I like to kind of run at things and see how they feel early, as far as what platform I might want to be creative in or anything like that. But then for me, I just throw anything away that's not visceral. Anytime I find myself starting to go down some I'm just staring at screens all night and whatever, and it's kind of arduous, I get kind of lazy there, but it's a bit of if I can literally find someone that does this all day long and they're amazing at it, and I can just talk to them and ask them to help, rather than do something that isn't what is inspiring to me or whatever. And I early on, there's these moments in technical history where a new technology comes out, and then there'll be a bunch of art that relates to that. But that only happens every so often. And then, to be honest, it really just all comes back to narrative. The same thing, Gilbert's saying. It's just what are you saying? Is it visceral? Does it make me does my brain chemistry change? And if not, it's do I really want to spend my time on it? And that's just my personal opinion. Some people have a different payoff for what they want to achieve. But I've just found that if it's not visceral to my brain, I can't, it's not as valuable either. It's just not as valuable to me. Things are boring.
Mm-hmm. Reminds me of,
getting.
It just reminds me of Marie Kondo. Does it spark joy? Does it spark joy? Does it drive your passion? Is it something that pulls you? Mm-hmm.
You took the words. That's what I was going to say. Passion. So you took the words on out. But you said it better. You said it better, and with the Marie Kondo reference.
The Marie Kondo reference, kind of random. No, I think that's really valuable.
one other thing that just as Gilberto and Brandon were talking, it reminded me too of something that I struggled with, and I think everyone knew at this is at a certain point you'll get really frustrated and you'll be banging your head against the same problem and getting nowhere, and then instead of just continuing to bang your head against it, to do something, like go back to something that you can get some success in to kind of give yourself some more confidence and juice. There was something that like Braille skateboarding, they do these skateboarding videos. They had these training videos about how to learn how to skateboard. And they were just like, if you keep on trying this trick and failing, like stop trying it and just go back to a trick that you know how to do well and try to just, give yourself some juice, some confidence. And
diabolical confidence.
I feel like it's a huge.
Yeah, I have conversations with artists about like the star power, the it thing. And honestly, it's not just about being a performer. It's just living life, in general is sometimes about that flow. And also, so my trombone professor in school told me one time, he was like, there's a time to do hard stuff. And then there's also like, if you're going out for like one of the biggest things of your career and blah, blah, do something easy, like play a piece of music. You play amazing. It does not need to be hard. You do not need to impress anyone. Like all you need to do is like move people or do something really well. No one wants you to do something hard, shitty.
Yeah, like kind of balance out the really difficult pushing the envelope and give yourself some easy wins too, because you got to
pick your battle.
That's great advice. That's great advice, because it's hard, especially when you're learning new technologies. You're like, oh, this is really great, and then it gets like really, really hard. You're like, you are like, what am I like? I know nothing. Like I know nothing. How did I get here? So going back to the pieces that you know well, I think is a great exercise. It's the confidence boost. That's needed there. So
you want to start from something that works too.
Yeah, exactly. And also what you and he were saying about, thinking about just like narrative and like the concept and like, what are you actually doing? Not the how you're doing it. Because I feel like it's easy to just be like, oh, I'm going to do all these pieces and like connect these things. And this is how I'm going to do it. But it's really important to always go back to the what, the source, the narrative that's driving whatever it is that you're creating. So I think that's also really valuable. Curious. So we talked about kind of the state of the past few years, present, and I'm curious about your thoughts of the future. Where do you think projects or, it could be workflows or technology are going to trend in the next few years and beyond? What kind of trends do you see unfolding, and how do you think they'll be projected in the next few years?
I actually think we're going to go back to narrative. I feel like now, and it may just be my age in the industry, but like I feel like we can do anything we want. Like at this point, I can embed 3D worlds onto the surface of another 3D world, all in real time with like all these. Like as far as where I could take a narrative of any particular thing, you can do anything you want. And so I also think that we're all saturated with content so much that, it's kind of interesting, the super bright, super colorful, like there's just so many different ways to hit people. But I don't know, I think it's a really like good branding and just good story is more of a commodity as technology becomes more accessible to everyone and more democratized and all that stuff. So like a flood of stuff, and you're just like digging more for the things that really hit you. So I think it's going to become more human.
I watched a documentary about Pixar, and that was the core to their success. It wasn't the technology that, like that was a little extra, fancy flash on top of it. But they were like, at the end of the day, the reason why Pixar succeeded was because they had like pathos and emotion, narrative, and like a meaning in their stories that like actually made you feel, something and give you new perspective. And all the tech on top of it was just extra. It was just nice frosting.
Yeah, I think everything is already invented, right? It's like everything is already there. but I see that it's much more collaboration, right? It's much. I feel that in the future it's gonna be like more multidisciplinary thing of view, like a lot of things that is in one project, and also of course machine learning. But you can see like GANs appear, and then everyone is like doing that. It looks like very repetitive, right? Like what is makes not too much sense now, but of course machine learning is a great thing for next years, right? It's like the last Memo Actin post was amazing. It was like, what the mind blowing.
Yeah, I would say that for sure. Like, we don't know what we don't know yet about some of those things. There was little, I mean, even looking back to Vade when he made Siphon, like that tiny little thing, like all of a sudden, like a bunch of different, honestly, NDI even is basically just a copy of that. I don't know what was before Siphon. It was the first thing I knew of like that, like a buffer pass.
Yeah, well, I mean, a few people were using those API features, but again, it wasn't accessible and it wasn't well documented for people to be like, oh, like you could just, you could have this GPU texture sharing and kind of have this like, so make it. And so I think that goes back to some of the earlier things just saying about like improving like the usability and ergonomics and user experience of like, because a lot of the technology already exists. So now it's just like, okay, well, how do we just make it like we reduce the friction to using it?
Actually, yeah, I would say the AI stuff, the camera recognition stuff, the way that we're going to be able to get much more human data curves, like the same way if you use a lemur or something with a physics engine for your controllers, and then you end up playing this game with the physics engine that actually creates different data curves than you would ever make if you were just using faders, knobs, or an XY axis without physics. That whole thing of it giving you a whole new set of kind of expressions. I think machine learning and AI is actually going to give us a really high resolution expression of like our body or our breathing or our heart rate or all these things. Like I think are eventually going to be really easy, just like the same as MIDI controllers, like boop, boop, boop. And then being able to record those very human things, we're going to get very different looking stuff, than what we're doing now, just with thresholds and mapping, depth clouds and whatnot. But I think that's one way where, that's going to really make it different and cool, is when we can get more human with all of it. And I can't wait till I can like grit my teeth, and was it Daito? Yeah, Daito Manabe did like all that myoelectric sensor early stuff, like doing beats with his muscles. It's so cool.
That's amazing. I'm curious. So when you talk about narrative, Brandon, are you describing story? Are you talking about narrative in a linear sense? I'm curious how you describe like what you mean by narrative.
Well, sometimes I think it's just like putting people in a space, and that's like a emotional space is the way I really think of it. But obviously it's like all the different senses can be a part of that. Sometimes it's just sitting in a space, and even songs can be 12 minutes long, but you're just in a space the whole time, one space. It's not dynamic. And then sometimes, I think about it as just, I don't know, I can see this crop on someone and get blown away, like by what's in that emotion. And so that's why actually a lot of my work sources from footage. I actually don't do as much generative or drawing engine work as I do footage, by probably 75-25. And it's because there's such a power for me in just being able to take a camera and shoot something that's moving and then go manipulate it. Even if it's just, I'm using it as data paint or something like that, there's still a really human curve of data that happens in footage, or just organic. I shouldn't say just human, but a very organic curve I get out of that. So yeah, that's what I mean by narrative. Is it just having another layer of meaning? I think about, like, when I think about the difference between prose and poetry and metaphor as art different from fact, right? And it's about having, that translation layer, that ambiguity layer, or whatever there, that extra layer of information. And I could take someone's eyes, make a shape art out of it, but the fact that the emotion is in their eyes gives a whole nother layer to that shape art, whatever that animation is. So that's what I mean by some type of narrative, some type of like other layer
human grounding
that a computer wouldn't necessarily see or understand. Like an AI looking at something is not going to necessarily gather. I mean, they're getting good at knowing our emotions, but still things that are kind of elusive. Like we don't really know why we feel them. Why? How does that stuff come across? I can't. You watch old recordings of performance music, Billie Holiday and stuff. I was watching old black and whites of, and it's just like, my God, like so much comes out of that, and it's 60 years later, and it's a recording. Like why? Like other than just body language and empathy and all that stuff, it's just amazing. So anyway, that's what I mean.
I'm curious, Gil and Landon, like, does your work, because kind of Brandon described the percentage of his work balancing more towards kind of found footage, shot footage. I'm curious, in your work, are you doing more generative graphics work? Like, how does that, like, what is that proportion in your work? Do you do a lot of generative work? Do you create built environments? What is that looking like?
For me, it's like very hard to say, but I have to say that we are more into computer graphics and interactive design, a lot of notch and content creation. But also I love what Brandon was saying, the narrative, and also to take sometimes it's easier to just take the footage and all these optical flow stuff that you can make inside of touch or notch is very interesting. But our work is more focused in computer graphics. We do a lot of content creation, but yeah, we also have some footage, but I have to say that it's more related to content in my side.
Yeah, I'd say so. Even though I'm a graphics programmer, mostly just making computer generated content. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm realizing that like everything that gets me most excited always has some really like more visceral human interaction element, whether it's like a point cloud coming from like a Kinect or like RealSense cams, hand tracking, like leap motion, ultra leap, or like body tracking, because there is something magical about that. Even just having like even having some interesting multi-touch interaction, because it takes this organic, our meat hands. It just, I don't know. It somehow bridges the gap between between those worlds. So there's something magic. Yeah, there's something magical about bridging the metaverse with the metaverse. That's I'm sure I'm not the first one to say that. But there's something I forgot to touch on too. It was that about the next 3 years or so, or like, is that there's a lot of like low code and no code startups and like all these crazy, like, I feel like a bunch of industries got inspired by what these creative industries were using for these visual programming languages, which if you ask a computer science major or something, like they understand that actually visual programming language can be designed to do everything a written programming language could do. Not all of them are, none of them go that deep, but it's losing. We're getting rid of the stigma that visual programming languages are just like some like training wheels thing for artists that don't know how to code, or that are kids or babies, or it's for a little education. That's and so there's been this gatekeeping around it that's starting to go away, and realizing that you can combine the best of both worlds, which is the low code. So you start people on no code and then ease in the low code, which is on. I mean, I would have never learned how to write software as fast as I did, and at like a bit of a later age than I guess that most people. I started like really only seriously learning how to code at like 26, which is like. But I feel like anyone. I feel like I could take Touch Designer and these other tools and like teach someone in their 60s or later how to. So anyway, no.
I love that.
Yeah, I was surprised when I first started looking at early machine learning stuff, and I was like, wait, these are the same array processes. These are literally the same packages and tools. Kind of surprised me how similar it was to, honestly, like Max MSP, like the way they had set up a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and these new industries are looking to our industry on how these things work. So, and so I'm interested to see how that shakes out, and what things from these tools, from say Max MSP was, even was really influential for how these visual tools got built, and now that's going to be influential for all of these other things being used for building everything in the world.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I feel like where we got to really kind of the through line was this, like, the human connection that exists within the tech that we work with. And, whether that comes through like the moving image or through sensor and data and information, or the people experiencing it in a physical space, right? The reason why we make this work is to be seen and like experienced by others. I guess we can make it for our computers, but we're really making it for each other to share it. And so I really appreciate all of you kind of sharing your thoughts here and taking the time to do this panel. So excited to see all the work that the contestants are doing. And I'm really looking forward to seeing all the work that you make next. Thank you all so much.
Yes,
thank you. I want to take this space to send my appreciation and gratitude for the great people we have in our industry. Edwards and Matthew, I love you, man. Love you, bros. And Greg, you are such an inspiration. Armin, everywhere is such amazing people.
Sure. I wouldn't be here without my mentors. Which includes Elvers and Matthew and then all and ultimately everyone in the community. We're all pulling together.
Yeah, for sure. That's a dream team. Those judges. Those are all the people I bug when I'm like, oh my god, help! Like,
yes, thank you to all of them, and thank you again to you all. Awesome. So I think this wraps our panel. Hope you all have a great weekend and that you tune in to the Immersive Interactive Championship.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Zoe.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you're serious about taking your touch designer and interactive skills to the next level, I highly recommend you check out the Interactive and Immersive HQ Pro. It's the only educational resource and community of its kind for touch designer and interactive professionals. You can learn more by checking out the link in the description. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe and the little bell icon for more awesome free content.